Welcome, everybody, to a Boxscore Geek episode. I'm not going to lie. I pitched this show to Brian, our producer, this week, and Brian likes me. That's the only reason he's going through. I'm a huge How I Met Your Mother fan, and I didn't actually realize this is crazy. Arturo and I have been blogging for 3 or 4 years now. Arturo Galletti, who's joining me on the show this week, as always, is a How I Met Your Mother fan as well. And I didn't realize this until I started tweeting a complaint, and he responded to it. So I wanted to talk How I Met Your Mother. Now, that's not really basketball related, but I got 2 outs for you. The way I want to phrase this is, I was disappointed with the ending of How I Met Your Mother, so we're going to be discussing How I Met Your Mother, how disappointing it was. But to start, we're going to be discussing other disappointing things this season. And I'm going to ask Arturo, our expert analyst, who surprisingly has already, Arturo, you've already sent me numbers of stats crunched on How I Met Your Mother. I expected nothing less. I knew you would have sources for that.
Yes, there's a great site which you're going to link to, which is called it's graphtvkevininformatics.com, which is probably like a huge time sink. It shows every show is graphed with their IMDb rating, and you can go in and kind of look at where did the show jump the shark and where did the show reach its zenith. And we spent about 20 minutes arguing about this, about the best episodes just before the podcast, about the best episodes and the worst episodes, where we had this agreement where I was clearly in agreement with the graph about what the worst episode was, and Dre wasn't in agreement with that.
It was like a tie for. We'll get to that though. That was like a tie.
We'll get to that. I think the nice part is, and we'll link it, is you can kind of look at your favorite show and see if you agree, and see if I looked at my favorite show to look at was Angel, and just get pissed off that it got canceled as it actually reached its best episode ever.
And we agree wholeheartedly on that. So what I will say is, I'm going to give full spoiler warnings to anybody watching this show. If you keep watching, we're going to talk the NBA first, as always. This is a sports blog. We're going to full spoilers on How I Met Your Mother. As we mentioned, we've got stats open for the entire series, so nothing is off limits for How I Met Your Mother. You've been warned. It's possible. Arturo and I are this big of geeks. We started talking Batman in the middle of How I Met Your Mother. So Batman, Death in the Family may also be a slight spoiler warning.
Death of the Family.
Did I say Death in? Sorry. All right. Death.
Yeah.
No
beating up Robin with a crowbar unless you're into it.
We both actually agree that the series was forgettable, which is why I've messed up the name.
Which is by the way, we're talking about Batman, not How I Met Your Mother. Nobody beats up Robin with a crowbar in the finale of How I Met Your Mother.
Wow, I didn't even make the Robin connection. Okay, but we decided, since we're going to be talking depressing stuff, we're going to be comparing How I Met Your Mother to depressing things in the NBA this season, we'd start on a high note. Now, it's funny that we chose this night to talk them, but we're going to talk the Spurs, who just had a 20-win, or it was 19 games. They were going for 20. They had 19 games in a row, but they just lost to the Thunder. We're going to talk the Spurs because, Arturo, I think, you've just been effusive in your weekly power rankings of them. I'm just going to ask you straight up. In the annals of all-time teams, 72-win Bulls, I think the 1971-72 Bucks, where does this Spurs team rank?
Well, I actually took the time, and I've been building an every game database for every game since the start of the NBA, which has been kind of a foreign exercise. And I think when I did the numbers, I looked at the best 19 game spans, and this Spurs team came out. It was the 71 Bucks, then the 2014 Spurs, then the 72 Lakers, 96 Bulls, and 2009 Cavs. That's a pretty impressive list for a 19-game span. With Kawhi Leonard playing more than 20 minutes, I believe it's 51-9 now, and projects something at either 70 wins or 69 wins. It's going to be fairly crazy once they win a few more games before the end of the season. It's a very impressive team. I think a lot's going to be made about the fact that they've lost 4 games to the Thunder this year. I've watched these games. I think that I think Pop kind of gave it he played hard, and he played his right rotation in the first half both these games. I think one of them, and then more than both these games, I think he also played Kawhi the one game he got hurt in the second half. I think this game he didn't play him in the second half, or he played him late and he didn't stretch the rotation. So I'm not convinced he was really giving it more than like a cursory try in this game. He rested Manu. He didn't play interesting rotation. So again, I think, and I was saying this to the Spurs fans on Twitter. It's stop panicking. Your team is having one of the great all-time runs. You shouldn't be worried about matchups. I don't expect the Spurs to have any problems in round 1 or round 2. I think it's going to be interesting in round 3. I think it'll come down to, like, I mean, if I don't think they're going to get every game whistled like they got the game tonight, where basically, you know, the Thunder had a license to foul, and also I don't think that Pop is going to, you know,
wow,
run
that
his
is
rotation.
that is a huge disparity. That the Thunder got 23 fouls, although surprisingly only 6 went to Durant, whereas the Spurs only got 12.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it happens. I mean, the Thunder were being really physical, and they weren't getting the foul calls. And happens when you're on the road. And I think also there was a Crawford prominently involved in that game. And again, I'm going to sound like a homer, but I'm not. I mean, I was watching the game objectively, and really, you know, it was a picking game. I mean, the Spurs were playing the 5th game in 7 nights. It was the second night of a back-to-back. They're playing probably the second best team in the league right now, with Russell Westbrook playing out of his mind. So, you know, they played him ahead the first half. They didn't try as hard in the second, and I think, you know, it showed. Then the Thunder win. I think in the playoffs it'll be a different story. I mean, anybody who looks at these 4 games and draws, oh, Thunder won 4 games. Well, you have to understand who the Spurs actually played. And I think, again, what I'm going to say is the Spurs are a historically great team. They should be favored to win the title. They're a better team than they were last year. I think the major roadblock to them winning the title is going to be the Thunder. If the Thunder get to the Eastern Conference Finals, the Western Conference Finals, I think the Thunder,
The
it's going to be
Thunder could make it to the Eastern Conference Finals just by looking at the East if they were in that conference.
Well, I made the joke that the Spurs bench would be my dark horse to make it out of the East. The East is interesting because I think right now, based on the last. And I ran the rankings today. The top 3 teams in the East right now are the Heat, the Bobcats, and the Nets. And the Bobcats actually, if the Pacers get the Bobcats, I'm picking the Bobcats. Same thing with the Nets. The Bobcats are actually, like, now that Al Jefferson's playing out of his mind, they're actually really good. They're like projecting it like almost 5 points better than an average team on a neutral site. So I mean, it's going to be interesting out east. I think Miami is going to have real problems. Kind of, I think their enemy is time and wear and tear. Right. If
there is a Derrick Rose like moment in the first round with LeBron, it's over.
Yeah, I mean, they need to be healthy. They're older. I think, again, as I said, I think the whole memo thing, supposedly the conspiracy theory is that LeBron talked to Commissioner Silver and said, like, the whole verticality memo. You saw the verticality memo, right?
I did not. What do you say?
Like, they changed, so like the player has to go straight up. If he moves sideways, the complaint was that it was directed at the Pacers. If he moves sideways, there's a point of emphasis. That's a foul. That's a foul, not a vertical, like, proper play. And it's directed at the Pacers and Roy Hibbert, and they're going up vertically, and they can't go up sideways when they jump. I think what's going to be interesting if the Heat are actually faced with the Raptors in a first-round series, and the Raptors are the team that, the Raptors go straight at the post. That's going to be like a really tough problem if they can't, like. They're going to get fouls on every call when these guys are driving. So it's going to be an interesting kind of series. I don't think the Raptors can actually beat one of the top teams because they're too young, but they can scare the crap out of somebody. And it's the same thing. I think that the Nets are a lot more spry now than everybody pays attention. I even think the Knicks, weirdly enough, are actually a threat to, like, if it's the Knicks versus the Pacers, it's going to be an interesting series.
Do you want to make me say this? I hate this because, by the way, he did this his last playoffs before he left the Nuggets. Melo is not at LeBron's level because he cannot sustain greatness, but Melo can play great over a 4 or 5 game stretch.
Well,
him and Chandler could bring him through a playoff round.
What if history repeats itself and Mike Woodson has to quit the Knicks for personal reasons, a la Stan Van Gundy, and Phil Jackson is forced to, a la Pat Riley, come down and coach the Knicks in the playoffs? What do you think about that?
I would love that. I hope that happens now. All right, I was going to say, so in terms of the show, I didn't want to spend too much more time on the Spurs. I wanted to give, so 2 questions. Just, you had mentioned this before.
By the way, I was like, Spurs historically great. Spurs clear favorite to win the title. And just don't worry about it. Like, Spurs fans, don't worry about it. I mean, this was not even, you guys, I'm working on something. You guys are not even playing in fifth. You're playing in first gear, right? So it's not, I wouldn't worry about it too much.
I've got 3 questions for you to end up on. And you don't I would stress, I understand I'm giving you things that like these could be essay questions to get into basketball analytics college. So like haiku answer, not basketball analytics, because I know it's unfair. These are
Okay.
long form. Okay, question one. You mentioned before the podcast that Tony Parker looks a little long in the tooth. Do you think he's going to get subbed out for Patty Mills? I'm not asking because I have Patty Mills on my fantasy squad.
I think, I mean, Patty Mills, and I think that the quote from Pop where he says like why didn't he get playing time last year because he was a little fat, and now he's not. He's in shape, and I think Patty's actually looked really really good, and they're actually the best five includes him. I think Pop will figure it out. I think what happens is I think Parker is hurt, and I think Parker will miraculously get better as we get closer to the playoffs. I do think there's a real kind of, if I'm the Spurs, I'm really thinking about do I need to kind of move on from Tony Parker in the offseason? That you might be able to get more value from him than he's worth. If you can get a draft, like I wouldn't be totally surprised if the Spurs like traded Tony Parker for like say a 10th rounder and pick some guy from tall guy from Europe or
the other thing I'll say though, and this could actually be part of one of the reasons the Spurs have maintained being a good team. I don't think they would show that disrespect to Tony Parker. I think if Tony Parker moves on, it's on Tony Parker's terms.
It's what Bill Belichick. It's what would Bill Belichick do? And Bill Belichick would cut his mother if he believed that he could get somebody better.
The Spurs aren't Bill Belichick. They kept Manu Ginobili around
because he's Manu Ginobili, and the contract they're getting from Manu Ginobili is totally a great contract. They're not paying him $48 million over 2 years. They're paying him, I believe, it's $6 million over 2. It's a ridiculously good contract for them.
If I get time to do this right, I may actually use Polar. Dimitri, you're awesome, and I apologize. I haven't been doing good enough work with that. We'll leave that as the first question in the audience that I'll actually put in the write-up is, will the Spurs move on from will the Spurs move on from Tony Parker? Arturo, of course, they're going to Bill Belichick him. Dre, no, the Spurs are going to show respect. Okay, second question. In terms of all-time greats, because this is just bizarre to me, especially I know you typically don't include longevity, but looking at Tim Duncan and including longevity, and again, I'm sorry to make this, I know this is a much bigger question, but I'm going to ask you for a haiku answer. Where does he rank all-time?
You mean among power forwards, or you mean overall?
I mean, it seems he's 17 years of this.
He's the best player of his generation. I think it was closer with him and KG and Kidd. But I think right now, clearly after last year's finals and clearly what he's doing this year, I think you have to consider him the greatest player of his generation. Now, all time, I think he's on a very, very, very short list. I think, you have to have Russell. You have to have Magic.
Well, actually, let's make that
easy. You have to have Jordan. My Mount Rushmore?
I was going to say, you actually, this seems like it lines up perfectly because you're basically, okay, so Magic Johnson is clearly the 80s. Jordan is clearly the 90s. Duncan is clearly the 2000s. LeBron is clearly the 2010s on. So actually, just for our basketball history fans.
Kareem is the 70, even though he's a ninny. But
okay. And the 60s is Russell or Chamberlain?
No, it's Russell.
You're giving it to Russell over Chamberlain. Okay,
it's Russell.
Well,
it's clear. It's clearly Russell. It's not even close to. I mean, like I understand, but it's clear Russell. Russell was the best defender. Russell did a lot of things that it's hard to capture because they weren't measuring blocks at the time. He's supposed to have like 15 or 16 block games. I mean, it was Russell.
All right. Well, I'm actually super content with that answer, and I'll leave the Mount Rushmore, however we want to put that there to end that. And the last question: who should the Spurs be most scared of, East and West? Like, which opponents do they not want to see in the playoffs, understanding that they are the clear favorites in any series?
I think the toughest opponent for the Spurs is the Thunder, and it's specifically because if the Thunder have Russell Westbrook playing at this level that he's playing at right now, and they have Kevin Durant, they're a team that can beat anybody. Now, this is more like, this is a 70, the comparison comes up in my brain. It's the 71 Bucks and the 72 Lakers. They're both historically great teams. And in the 1972, the Bucks and the Lakers ran into each other. It's kind of the same thing with the Heat last year. It's like, these are like some historically great teams that we're seeing. And I think with Russell and particularly Russell playing at this level with Kevin Durant, they have a puncher's chance. Right, and I think that's the most dangerous team. Anybody else, I mean, they will kill the Suns. They'll kill Dallas. They'll kill anybody else. I think the Heat are. I mean, honestly and truly, I think the Heat are just too old, and I think the East is going to get really tough, and it's going to, and I mean this in like all the other roles, but like it's LeBron and Wade is kind of hobbled, and then there's Bosh, and then everybody else on that team is old or really flawed, right? And I think that's going to come back to bite them. And also, it's really hard to make 4 finals in a row. And I think you got to, historically, it's not something that just happens. So I think the biggest challenge is going to come in the Western Conference Finals with the Thunder. If they make it there.
No modern team. Has any modern team made 4 consecutive finals? Did one of the Lakers or.
No, the Celtics did.
The Celtic, was that in the 80s?
No, I think the Celtics made 3. Wait, it was no, we made 4 finals in a row, but the 4th final was the one where after Len Bias died and Kevin McHale kind of basically destroyed his foot, and Larry Bird destroyed his back. So they were not the same. By the time they made the finals, they were dying. So I mean, it's something that you don't, you really there is a cost to doing it. You're kind of seeing it with Miami. I mean, Miami's good, but again, I think that it's going to show, and I think the fact that the East has gotten way tougher is going to be kind of interesting.
Yeah, the Lakers. By the way, from your point, the Celtics did it in the '80s, and the Lakers and Celtics both made 4 consecutive.
Yeah, and but it just wears on you, and it just kind of destroys you afterward. I think honestly, I think the Thunder are going to actually have problems. The Thunder are a little more flawed. I think the Thunder can have real problems with the Rockets, and I think particularly with the Clippers. I think the Clippers are a real problem for the Thunder. And I think that's kind of where I think it breaks is I think the Spurs play the Rockets and then play the Clippers, and I think that's the way it's going to go. They're going to play Dallas, then the Rockets, then the Clippers.
So, by the way, if we want to talk Tim Duncan, so Brian just sent this along to me. It's playoff streak appearances. The San Antonio Spurs currently sit tied with 17 seasons in a row for, I think, 4th or 5th on the list behind the Lakers. The Lakers have one more title during their streak. So if the Spurs can make it to another, they're obviously going to make it. If they can win another title, they will be tied with the Lakers. And, of course, if they get next season, they'll overtake the Lakers and be one behind your Boston Celtics. Though the Celtics 11 rings in 19 seasons, no one's ever going to touch that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with it, and I keep coming back to it, is I like Thiago Splitter, but Thiago has some real flaws in his game which kind of show up. And kind of in certain situations, Diaw is a much better play. And for whatever reason, Pop kind of sticks with Splitter when he kind of shouldn't,
Yeah, but we'll see if they get that ring and I hope they overtake the Lakers.
Yeah.
That would.
You didn't ask me the most disappointing thing of the season. I had an answer.
We're going for that. So actually, this is the next part. That was the optimism, right? We're talking the Spurs. Tim Duncan is on the Mount Rushmore of the NBA. The Spurs are one of the best teams ever. They're the favorites for the finals. Now we're talking disappointment, like the How I Met Your Mother finals. So the first subject I want to bring up, and don't worry, I'll let you ask. I'll let you bring up any if I forget. But compared to the How I Met Your Mother final with all the excitement and the build-up, how disappointing is the Pacers drop-off?
It's not to me. It's not disappointing at all. It proves that the numbers were right. It proves that this team was not as good as their record, and that they were more close to what we predicted at the beginning of the season, and what everything else kind of showed. I mean, I think you're seeing what the Pacers are. Their Pacers kind of play in a certain way because everybody was having career highs and everybody kind of reverted. I do think we called them as being disappointed. They're not going to go under, but they're going to come close. I mean, I think 53 wins. They need to win. They would need to lose out not to hit the over. But I think it's going to be close. I think they're not as good as they were in the first half, and I think they're clearly going to have real problems getting out of the first round. So I'm not disappointed at all in the Pacers.
We should stress.
I feel vindicated, actually.
As a non-Pacers fan, though, is the importance. Okay, so question number 2. This is a little rough for me, so I'll let you do the clinical analysis instead of bring my own thoughts. More depressing, the Denver Nuggets or the How I Met Your Mother season? I'm gonna include the entire season, the series and the finale, because you were. We'll get to it, but you weren't as.
We'll get to it. I think the Nuggets are. The Nuggets had a plan or had something that they want to do, and I understand what they're doing it. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with it, but again, I'm not the biggest fan of the Nuggets ownership group for reasons because they also own Arsenal, and I'm kind of not happy with what they've done over the last 3 or 4 years with the team. But again, I think they've been playing free, they've been playing lost, and I think the problem with them is they've had some critical injuries, and they were good for a while there. But I mean, they were counting on Gallinari coming back, they were counting on McGee coming back, but I think they just decided to bail on the season and get the draft picks, which is what they're doing right now. They're going to try to get some more people in it. So I don't necessarily think it's disappointing. I think they had a plan and they've executed it, which is they figured out.
Trading Kufus, getting Randy Foye and Nate Robinson, that's not. There's nothing disappointing about that.
Well, again, I think what's the long-term plan there? I think if they're tied to, they want to play JaVale and they want to play free and they want to play Lawson and they want to get 2 lottery picks in there, or 2 high draft picks in there and add that to the show and actually, instead of having a team that wins 45 games, which is the pace they were playing before they started tanking on the season, get a team that maybe can win 55 or 60, then I think that was the right play. I think they had some assets and they had to do it. I think they just basically said, let's take a year to reset. I understand they didn't tank out and bottom, but I think they just kind of looked at what they had and decided that this was the right way to go. I don't know. I think I get their plan. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand what they were doing.
Okay, so if this doesn't tank the Eternal Optimist, I'll just admit defeat. So we got through our 2 topics there. The last one, more disappointing, the How I Met Your Mother final season, or Anthony Bennett is the #1 pick.
Well, I think Cleveland needs to be protected from themselves. I think the 2 teams, and I was going over this with Daniel LaRoe from Real GM. We were going over what the T-Wolves have done and the draft assets of the T-Wolves have had since the Kevin Garnett trade. And honestly and truly, if you walk through the drafts and the draft positions and the draft picks that the T-Wolves have had, they've really had to screw up every single pick.
Are you talking the Cavs or the T-Wolves?
No, I'm talking about the T-Wolves. They really had to just go and just do the worst possible thing at every possible time not to contend. Really, if you look at it, they've just missed on some doozies. And it's the same thing with the Cavs. The Cavs have after LeBron left, if somebody rational and actually be running the team, if you look at the guys that they could have had, if they gotten half the guys they could have had, this would be easily a 6th seed in the East right now. But they've really kind of run this team in just the strangest possible way, and you're just basically frittered away every asset. They've had assets. It's just badly managed teams run the teams badly, and then we're surprised. A team that sucks, we're surprised that they keep running the team badly. So they had draft assets and they didn't know how to use it. So tanking doesn't solve anything if your ownership in your team still sucks, and the ownership in the team in Cleveland sucks.
So, by the way, the fun stat, and it's possible, he could have an amazing last, 5 or 6 games if he's still healthy. But Anthony Bennett is only the 3rd, and I will give you mad points if you can name the other 2. Actually, you may have seen this. I think you saw this on Twitter, so you know the answer. But to anybody out there, if you're listening, if you can name the other 2 off the top of your head without looking this up, Anthony Bennett may end up being only the 3rd #1 pick in the history of the NBA draft to average fewer than 5 points a game in his first healthy season in the NBA. Yeah. And the other one is Kwame Brown. And if anybody out there knows the other one, it's a favorite franchise who fails at the draft regularly. Anyway. Okay, so Arturo, is there anything in terms of disappointments of the season? We've got 3 good ones that I had. Are there any disappointments of the season you have? And I'll be happy to answer my thoughts if they're more or less disappointing.
I'm disappointed that Kobe Bryant didn't get to play the entire season, because I would have loved to have Kobe Bryant play the entire season and have the Lakers suck. They would have, even if he played.
Even in the best, even with the most.
Let's say if he comes back and he doesn't get hurt again, he plays the rest of the entire season and they still suck, because it would have been terrible because he was hobbled. So I think it would. I think the hubris of them kind of going at every analyst who was saying they were not going to be any good is kind of what annoyed me. And I would have liked to have them go out and say, well, what's wrong? Well, man, you're old. And you're really not in good health, and they shouldn't be playing you $24 million to play. And I think that would. I think I also would have liked to see Derrick Rose kind of play. And I think just because I think the fact that I think they would have made a difference to this Bulls team, and I think right now we'd be talking about the Bulls. I think the Bulls would probably be the 1 seed in the East if Derrick Rose was actually healthy.
If Derek, yeah, we really like that. Actually, I really like that. Derek Rose versus Derek Rose may be the answer to something more depressing than How I Met the final season. So I'll give that to you. Now on that note, we talked a ton before. This was so much fun. I expect nothing less of you. You're an analytics guy. Brian, I will probably have this coming up. It's graphtv.kevinformatics.com. Shows amazing graphs showing IMDb's ratings for How I Met Your Mother. I was wildly disappointed with both the season finale and the final season of How I Met Your Mother. With a few good, there were a few good games in there, right? You know, the How Your Mother Met Me was a good episode. What did you think of Daisy?
Which one? Which was Daisy? Which one?
When we find out Lily's pregnant with his daughter.
I thought that was a good episode, but again, I think, and we were talking about this before. I think the problem with this was it's like a director who has like Final Cut but shouldn't have Final Cut. It's like George Carl, right? It's like George, you're brilliant, but you don't know your rotations. So really, I think somebody should have told him, look, just make the wedding 4 episodes. Just get all this good stuff in the wedding, do it in 4 episodes, and then like instead of spending 15 minutes in the last episode drawing out this narrative arc, why don't you do it over a 15-episode arc and then kind of draw out what the motivations for the characters are? And I was telling this to Dre. I mean, I think there is a consistent narrative arc in the final episode. The problem is it takes too short of a time. Barney and Robin should not have worked, right? Robin, she knew that like Ted was the love of her life, but she thought she was wrong with him because she couldn't have kids. And I think this has been established in the last few seasons.
Now, 2 questions on those narratives, though. So first off, and again, obvious, I gave the spoiler flag, but just in case, full spoilers again. The episode before the finale, Robin basically tells Ted she wants him, and Ted says no. And this is utterly absurd.
I've moved on.
But he's moved on in the scope of 2 episodes. That is. I'm sorry, I'm getting upset. That is ridiculous because if we watch the locket that he spent all this time tracking down, he runs the wedding. For us to believe the fact that we're supposed to believe he's gotten over Robin in 2 days, because that's how long this final season is, that to me is just offensive, especially since they built up that episode.
But again, it's the point that like he's going through the process of letting her go, and he thinks this is right for her. And again, the characters aren't making necessarily the right decision, or what we think is the right decision if we know everything, but it fits to what the relationship has been. It's the same thing why they broke up in the first place. They wanted different things. She wants to travel. He wants kids. She also knows she can't have kids, so she probably thinks she's not the right person for him. So I think it makes sense. And I think, and again, and this is kind of all intimated to the point like she knows she should have wound up with him, and this is why she leaves New York and she never comes back. And like, you know, Lily's calling out like a Shabatsky sighting, and she says it out loud. I can't see him with this beautiful mother of his child, right? And I think, and again,
by the way, that was a good point you made. I didn't catch that, and I'm sure it's all over the internet. I didn't do as much reading on the final because I didn't want to just be more infuriated. But you point out it's very obvious that Robin moves away from New York and has moved back after the mother has died.
Yeah, and she moves back immediately. Apparently, it feels almost like she moved back immediately after she died to help kind of her, you know, Ted and kind of pick him up, and the kids kind of are familiar with Robin, and she comes over to dinner all the time. You guys are great. So it's almost like they see it, and like she's been taking care of him and she's there, but he himself doesn't see it. And again, as I said, it would have played much better as a longer arc, and I think you could have made an episode on the playbook too, and kind of Barney kind of finally like meeting his daughter and the whole thing, and it could have been a much better much better arc. And I think that's the problem, is like the timing was off. The stories made sense, but the timing was completely off, right?
And so what I'll give narratively, like my biggest complaints was, and I think you're agreeing, is that, yeah, this stuff makes sense. So for instance, I agree that Robin and Barney should not have ended up together. In fact, I was starting to get annoyed when they were showing some of the flash forwards and we finally see Robin and Barney together. And, you know, of course, we noticed that it's, you know, only a couple of years in the future, not, you know, 20 or 30 like we do with Robin and Marshall. But, you know, I was going, they don't belong together. This doesn't make sense. It's like I went, I don't care how much Barney says he's reforming. This doesn't make any sense. So I'm happy with that. But the thing is, they spent, what, an entire season on the wedding, basically 2 seasons building up to the actual wedding. They teased it, right? They let us know that Robin was marrying Barney way back. So they spent so much time teasing this wedding.
I think the thing is that we're looking at the graphs right now. The highest rated episode for the entire series is How Your Mother Met Me, which is season 9, episode 16, and it's on the mother. And I think, as I'm saying, is do that. That's your season. And then like that in the first half of what happened in Last Forever, just stretch that out over the whole season and flesh it out. And I think the best episodes, there's the end of the hour, which is like the next to the last episode, which is when, you know, they have the resolution of the wedding day. If they had that and then like eliminate some of the crap, which is like the four worst episodes of the entire run of the show are in the last season. So it's the mom and dad, which bad. The bedtime stories, which you hated as the worst episode of the series. I thought it was bad, but not the worst. The Slapsgiving 3, which basically I almost stopped watching the show after Slapsgiving 3. It was so bad. It was the stupidest and just the worst. I mean, it was just a filler episode. They would have been better with clip show.
It was filler. It was stupid. It was racist. It had everything. So for me, by the way, it's up there. Like, don't get me wrong.
The last one is the last episode. Obviously, is the other one they have up there in IMDb.
But I give it to you, and we're going to throw this out to you guys out there. What is worse? Because I think Bedtime Stories is clearly worse than Slapsgiving 3. I admit they're both terrible.
No. I disagree completely. Slapsgiving, I didn't even chuckle once. It was so bad. It was like the stupidest and dumbest story. It just made no sense, right? It just made no sense.
Now, actually, I want to ask you, as an analytics guy, one of the things you've done in the NBA is you've looked over history and you've noticed things like, you know, when I did net points, you basically said, hey, it has to be pace adjusted. You've done competition adjusted. You know, we've said things. I think this is still right. Would you argue that, like, Durant and Braun are two of the greatest ever when you look at just the era they're in and the, you know, kind of strength of the opponents that they've got going?
Well, somebody made a wrong-headed point, but it had something like that today in the comment section in Boxscore Geeks, which is players get better all the time. So yes, given the level of domination and the level of competition, Kevin Durant and LeBron James are two of the greatest of all times. And I've made the point that I think LeBron James may be the greatest of all times.
So, okay, now on that note, this is perfect. On that note, if you look at one of the strongest seasons of How I Met Your Mother, I would argue, surprisingly, season 7 was one of it. 2 episodes in a row, or not in a row, they're separated by one. Episode 10 and episode 12. But Graph TV, Ken Informatics, you are an amazing site. But episode 10 is Tick, Tick, Tick. And episode 12 is Symphony of Illumination. I think these are 2 of the strongest episodes in the show. And they are ranked a measly 8.8, 8.7. I ask you, Arturo, did season 7 suffer from any pace adjustment?
I mean, I like those 2 episodes. I mean, watching it, when I watched it live, right, when I watched it, the 2 episodes, my favorite episodes of the entire run are, I think, Farhampton and the Magician's Code Part 2, which is the end of season 7, start of season 1, which is really kind of the scene before it falls off. I love that episode. I liked the other ones that show really high. I like the Playbook. I think that's a really strong. I like Girls vs. Suit, which is the one with a musical number. I think the other one, which is up there, which is Slap Bet, is also great. I think having those above Tick, Tick, Tick and Symphony of Illumination is understandable. And I think while those are really, really strong episodes, I think I probably have to go with the Victoria's wedding as like the kind of the zenith of the entire storyline for the show. And I think that to me is the high point. Now there's Final Page Part 2 as well, and the How Your Mother Met Me. But I think to me it makes sense where it is. It's in the top 10 for the series. It's a very strong series. I mean, if you compare this to, like, say, Frasier, I mean, I think the first episode that was below a 7 was in season 7, right? Everything else was like 7.5 or above, right, for the entire run until, like, you know, until we get into season 9, to the last season. So it's a very, very strong show, very strongly rated. And if you look at it, I mentioned Frasier because it's, again, I think it's one of the best comedies on TV. That had some, like, you know, some shows that well, actually it's close. It's in the 8s and 7.5s as well, right?
So I agree. And by the way, as anybody, if you're not watching the show live, and I believe the podcast is the more popular format, but I started applauding. I think you nailed it when you basically compared the show kind of to George Carl, because if you go on an episode by episode basis, the writing is so tight, the jokes are so well done, the characters are great. But sometimes if you look at the overall arcs, like as you mentioned, season 9, it suffered so much from just as a narrative arc being terrible. That like I think you're 100% right. The How Your Mother Met Me was way more than an episode, and if you're going to feed us filler episodes about stupid the I don't even want to talk. I think they should just remove it from the DVD and never ever show Slapsgiving 3 again. And same with bedtime stories. But if you're going to have these stupid filler episodes, then you could have expanded your best episode, which had tons of material, into 2 or 3 episodes.
Well, again, I think the finale, if the finale had been played out over 15 episodes, right, it would have been fantastic because there are things there that were an entire episode. Like you could have had the Halloween party, which is like a 5-minute kind of thing where Robin comes back. That could have been a great episode. You could have had like when they're going out and like and they want to like stay out overnight. I mean, like there are things that happen in that final episode that could have been stretched out or played as a single episode for a season. It would have been great TV. And I think this is where they kind of screwed the pooch, which I think they got married to a gimmick, right? I think, yeah, and we were talking about this. They killed the mother in season 2, right? And what I mean by that is, if you read the story of the show, they initially in season 1, Robin was the mother, right? And then after they went past and got picked up, then they decided that Victoria was going to be the mother, and they shot the scene with the kids at the end of season 2, and they decided like the scene, they were going to kill the mother, so it was always going to be Victoria dies, and then he winds up with Robin, and then like it changed over when Stella came along, and Stella was going to be the mother.
Curiosity, I didn't do as much reading on this. Is there any reason it switched between Victoria and Stella?
But it's just the availability of the actress. So it was, if the show was going to get canceled in the first season or the second season, it was in danger of getting canceled. I think it was 4th season for Stella. If it ended there, then she would have been the mother. And then they kept kind of moving it along and changing it over. And then eventually, then they kind of moved from there to, the character. They started painting her like around, I believe it's 4th or 5th. It's when they have it's when they go to the St. Patrick's Day. It's a St. Patrick's Day episode where he goes out and he finds the umbrella, where they start kind of throwing out the whole. Is it Miracles? I forget.
Yeah, I know which episode you're talking about. Yeah, when he acts like a jerk and he finds
it's St. Patrick's Day, and it's also the episode where he dates her roommate. Right?
Yeah.
So that's where they kind of moved on into the mother character. But they're always going to kill her off. Apparently, that was shot since the 2nd season. I think they got married to that. And they got married to, they did the whole Barney and they did the whole Marshall and Lily wedding over, like, stretched it out over a bunch of episodes. And then they decided they got married into, let's have a whole season about the wedding, which was dumb. I mean, really, it was just somebody should have just had Final Cut and said, like, guys, this is 5 episodes at most. Move on. And then you have, go ahead.
And I was just going to say, and by the way, to that point, and I want to make sure this is overtly out there, the movie Definitely Maybe, starring Ryan Reynolds, which Arturo pointed out before the show, like many Ryan Reynolds movies, is very forgettable. So, if you haven't seen it or can't remember it, maybe you saw it and just don't know. It is essentially How I Met Your Mother Season 9. It's the exact same story with a father telling his daughter how he met her mother. The father basically really kind of admitting that he's in love with this other woman from his past. The daughter kind of giving her blessing for him to go on. There's even a side story with him finding a book and going out of his way to track it down and trying to give it back to her. I complained about the Locket storyline in the final season, which is this big elaborate ploy where Ted's trying to find a locket to give back to Robin. So very, very similar. But the, of course, difference is that's a 2-hour movie with much less emphasis on, the wedding or him with the other woman, and more emphasis on it was Isla Fisher, more emphasis on his time with her and then ending up with her. So basically, to your point, Arturo, you're right. Like the person editing this, it's like, why are, if in that movie, it'd be like, why on earth are we having an hour-long scene with Ryan Reynolds getting married? Like, what are we doing? That's not where we want the focus to be.
It makes no sense. Just some Final Cut. And I think, the EW, Entertainment Weekly, has a great list where they go through the top 50 episodes for the show. And I think what's interesting about this is there are 50 episodes in this show. And really, you go through the list, and they're all really good episodes. And the fact that you can actually get 50 episodes for the entire show is really kind of good. I mean, like that means it's some really good quality television.
So it's got
right?
roughly it's got roughly 200 episodes total, is what you're saying? Like, would be a standard show, right?
I think it's 150 odd episodes. It's 9 seasons. No, it's 180, 100 and I want to say 100 and whatever. This is great. This is a great podcast. I think it's almost 200 episodes, I believe. And out of that, they ranked. So basically, they ranked the top 50, and you read through it, and those are all really. There's some really good episodes for the show. I mean, I think, as I said, I think the 3 situation comedies. If I had to say the 3 best American situation comedies I've seen in my life, it's probably going to be this. It's going to be Frasier, and it's going to be Seinfeld, right? And these are things that you can watch. And I think just the disappointment is like really all these great actors and writers, and they cocked up the final season. They just kind of they didn't do it very well.
And an impressive note, I'm looking at the show again, Graph TV, kevinformatics.com. I'll keep saying that, it's just such an amazing site. They have 7 of 9 seasons have an episode, at least an episode rated above 9. Again, you robbed season 7. I still disagree. I think it was one of the strongest seasons. I can't believe there's not an episode above 9 there. But they have, 7 seasons with a 9 or above in it. That is remarkable. It's not quite...
I will agree with you that season 7 is the best season of the show. I'll agree with you. I have no issue with that. Watching it was the best season of the show at the time. And what you were saying, that basically the fact that they were so good kind of made it so that there's not a bigger differential. I think also the fact that there were some real downers in that season. People kind of get upset. I think Barney's dad died. Sorry, Marshall's dad died, and the whole storyline with Robin can't have kids. So I mean, there was some real kind of rough stuff going on. I think it's one of the best seasons for a show that I've seen. I mean, I throw that up there with some of the best Frasier seasons and some of the best Seinfeld seasons.
Another show you brought up before when you would start was like Angel. I think Angel had the same. Angel did it differently. Like if How I Met Your Mother went one more season, it could have pulled an Angel where basically it had this like off season where you're like, what the heck is going on? And then it could have pulled itself out. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So I've got, I was going to say, one point I wanted to make, because we didn't really bash the show. In fact, we seemed to love the show. But I was just going to say, just kind of stylistically, I really think that Marshall and Lily's storyline was pretty tight throughout the show. And I really like that. And you kind of talked about this, how, people don't get what they want. I really liked how kind of true to life that is, because, it wasn't the Friends ending of, oh, they're going to get they're going to get the kids they want and the house they want. And this Marshall and Lily it's a married couple who have, different wants and desires at certain times. And it's like their life plays out. And I actually really liked that take on a couple.
Well, I mean, I think again, it's shit happens in the show. I mean, Robin can't have kids, Barney can't commit, right? Or he's not, he can never kind of get better. He's always who he is. Ted is kind of a douche. He's not the greatest guy sometimes. But I mean, and then his wife dies. I mean, he gets a happy ending, but he doesn't get it forever. And I think it's messy and it's dirty, and that's kind of the point. I mean, it's a very kind of British way. And I say this to play it, and I understood it. I understood the story arc. I think again, the problem was how it was presented, because it was presented like this great happy ending for Robin and Barney, and it wasn't. And within 5 minutes, and again, it's all been painted because remember they broke up before, and they broke up for pretty much the same reasons they ended up breaking up in the end, and so it's been telegraphed. And we like to think that like the rom-com kind of idea that the girls love, which is like, oh no, they're going to change, it's going to get better. But it doesn't necessarily get better, it doesn't necessarily change. The flaws were there, and they kind of ended up like taking out the relationship. But again, I think it made narrative sense to me, but they didn't let the narrative breathe because they tied themselves. They decided let's do the stupid wedding over a whole season because nobody's ever done it before. Right, and I think that's not the right way to go. I mean, I always go back. I think one of the most ambitious, one of the most influential or like important things in terms of how we do television is, and it doesn't get enough credit, is Babylon 5. Where J. Michael Straczynski basically said, I'm going to plot out the entire plot of the show over 5 seasons, and I'm going to tell a consistent like arc over the course of 5 years. And nobody really had ever done that before. right? And again, he got ripped off a little bit by Deep Space Nine and some other shows after it, but he was really the first one to say, "Look, I'm going."
There is no little bit on Deep Space Nine. They flat out stole that idea.
Well, he pitched Deep Space, pitched Babylon 5 to the DS9 folks to the Star Trek folks first. But the whole story, the point is, he set out to tell a whole consistent story, right? And the point I was going to make is, like, he set out, he had the story, but he wasn't married to it in the sense, like, when things changed, he dumped his lead actor after the first season. He changed.
Did you hear about that? He kept that really under wraps, but I guess Jeffrey O'Hare had like major mental conditions and basically wasn't really kind of couldn't act, and even him coming back for some of the greatest television, which was Babylon Squared or whatever.
Babylon Squared, yeah.
I forget the episode title, but War Without an End 1 and 2. He could, but to that point, I just want to make sure Jeffrey O'Hare gets credit.
He was able to modify and update the story, and I think the How I Met Your Mother folks were telling a story over the course of the season, and there was always this underlying story, which was kind of a little bit groundbreaking too for a kind of an episodic comedy in the U.S. Nobody's ever really. I mean, I can't think of another series off the top of my head where like there's like a consistent storyline that's being told across the series, and the characters are evolving towards an end point. So there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and they got tied into like that end, but they weren't willing to modify that, and they decided to get cute about the device. And I think they were more concerned about form than function, and I think that's what killed them, right? I think as I said, if they just stepped back and said, this doesn't really make any sense for the final season, let's split this up better, it would have played much better than it actually did.
I agree. And one thing I will throw out there is, I write a bit at my my Quora blog about kind of misogyny in pop culture, and it's one of those things. Unfortunately, if you're gonna like pop culture, even if you write about it and dislike it, you can't divorce from it. It's too pervasive to get away from. And How I Met Your Mother has never been a fantastic show when it comes to misogyny and treatment of women. Barney is a sociopathic character that is very borderline, but I will say is unfortunate is they really did do a women in refrigerators with the mother. As you're pointing out, had they actually played out his relationship with her, they gave her a few episodes, right? There was the episode he's talking to her. They did it twice, right? They killed off his mother unceremoniously. We don't know how she dies, and they kill off.
No, they don't kill off his mother. You're confused. That episode, he's not sad because his mother's dying. He's sad because his wife is dying.
Oh wow! Okay, never mind.
So he's sad. He's sad because they're going back to Farhampton, where he proposed to her, right, and where he met her.
And
they're spending time. And they're spending time. And there's a whole thing about they're talking about. We finally made it. We're an old married couple, and it's sad and melancholic because she's dying. Wow. And when they have the line about the mother not making it to the daughter's wedding, right? And he starts breaking down. It's because she's not going to make it to the daughter's wedding. And I think again, the whole kind of thing is. I mean, it's the implication is that he's destroyed by her death, and then like Robin comes back to kind of take care of him, right? And like live in New York and help the gang take care of him. And I think, and she comes back because she loves him, right? And I think, but again, they did not play this out. The implication is there; it's in the subtext. But it's really hard sometimes for people to kind of, there's narrative subtext, and it's hard for people like to see these things. And if they played out, you would have seen it. But the subtext is all there, right? So a lot of these things are foreshadowed, and they're there. I mean,
had they given her a better death than just say, I was upset by the death to, if you look at the mother's treatment, I'm saying plural in the final episode, basically the mother just kind of, we're seeing her die off screen. She was totally fridged. If we look at Barney's wife, the mother, not wife, this is the mother of his child.
We don't know if he marries her.
Yeah, I would assume he doesn't, because she's just referred to as Woman 31, and this is Ted telling the story. So if he marries her, has a long-term commitment, we would find out. By the way, on your note about, and I think that does happen, Robin coming back, I would love to see like a weird Full House-ish story again about like Ted, Barney, and Robin, and like one other crazy person raising a set of kids just like Full House. I say bring it back with an updated.
The Seth Green character, who I forget his name, who was the guy who did the weird thing in college with William Marshall. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think you can't go in that direction because that's like, that's the roses and everything goes happy kind of deal. And I think this show had a darker heart, and I think it was better because of it. I think shows that have that are better. I mean, like I think Seinfeld has a dark heart in a way. They're not nice people, right? And I think things like, I think even Frasier had some of that as well. I mean, there is a value in this, and I think what I think people were upset about was they didn't get this. They didn't get, as you said, they didn't get the detail of the story that they wanted. I think, and you mentioned, I think part of it they might be just trying to save the mother for her own show, right? But I think they could have had the season like I wanted and made for a much stronger show for her, because again, I think part of the thing is they found an actress that really worked with the Ted character, who, as I said, I mean, he'd gotten to be more and more likable somewhat as the seasons went on, but she and him worked. I mean, that character, I forget her name, the actress' name, I forget her name right now.
All of the fans that were just impressed with you as the How I Met Your Mother guy are just like turning on you right now. I can see it.
I don't. It's Tracy. Tracy's the character's name. I don't remember the actress's name off the top of my head.
Okay, but by the way,
I remember everybody. I remember everybody else's name. I just don't remember her name right now.
One thing I will give
She's
you
the
about
mother.
the mother. The one thing I'll give you about the How I Met Your Mother, just in general, to kind of your point.
Tracy McConnell is the character's name.
Okay.
The character, not the actress's name.
She doesn't get for. Oh man, even though I mean, I guess it makes sense because IMDb goes by. Let's see, has she been updated? She is just the mother. It's Kristen Milotti.
Kristen Milotti. Kristen Milotti. Yeah.
Is it me? It's it M? Is it Io? Like I don't. Okay,
it's
man.
It's Milotti.
Okay, we're getting all the fans upset. What I will give the show is like their take on rough stuff was a lot better handled. The breakups in the show were more kind of realistic. The characters kind of understood. That was the annoying part about the Barney Robin breakup in the last episode. There was no time for any of those stories to breathe, even though, as you mentioned, narratively they all made sense. But I really did like throughout the course of the show, when Ted and Robin break up, it's not a stupid, super big fight. What is it? The Friends, I Was on a Break. It was them hitting a point in their relationship where they just realized, hey, we keep saying we're going to move in together. We keep saying you don't care about kids, but you do. And we've hit this point where we're either going to have to go forward or break up. I liked a lot of that the show actually treated those better. So I agree with you on that point.
And again, I think if we'd seen what we should have seen over the last story, I mean, they both would have gotten to a point where it made sense again. And I think, because of as they're older and go through life, I think, there's, as I said, there's clear indication that Robin changed her life around to kind of be there for Ted. And I think that's, if that's, that kind of tells me that, and even the kids, I mean, like people are like, oh, why are the kids? Like, it's been 6 years. And it does look like this woman has been a fixture of their life and kind of been the mother figure in their life for those 6 years since their real mother died. So, I mean, and if the dad's been pining over her and telling all these stories, and the character's probably been telling all these stories about her, that they really probably want their dad to kind of get out there. And it looks like, they look this person who's been there for him. The kids, I think, are gonna. It makes sense for them to kind of say, just go get her.
This story made complete sense, and as I mentioned, it was played out exactly this way in Definitely Maybe. Like that part. I guess we're winding down. That's okay. The one part I was a little. The two characters I was a little disappointed on for the finale. The one last part that kind of disappointed me was Barney and Robin. I feel just really didn't get a strong ending. I mean, we know Robin ends up with Ted. But, because her care, and I guess it's fair because Ted wouldn't know what she went off and did as much, right? Or wouldn't have the same perspective. He has a very insider perspective to all the stories he's telling. And his entire purpose is to explain why he should end up with Robin. But it is just really interesting. It's kind of sad that we've kind of grown to love these characters and they kind of just disappear off and, they kind of give him lip service. They say, well, Barney got a kid and Robin ends up with Ted, but they didn't really get a major send off, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, I think again, it's painted. It's read between the lines. I mean, I think I think we see that Barney really did love her, but it just didn't work, and he kept pushing and pushing and pushing. But they wanted different things, and it just didn't work for them. And I think he throws himself back into kind of this character. And again, it's been established that the whole Barney thing is a bit of a character because of when he had bad things happen to him, he went in a certain way. He was a certain person, and he went a different direction when he got hurt, and then he went back to when he got hurt again. He went back to what he was. And I think then this is why he gets the redemption with the daughter, where he goes back to the person he was before the whole tragedy happened to him in his life, and he got he I forget, he was the whole hippie thing. And I think the trick is, again, that you don't see that play out over. That's probably 2 episodes. They probably could have made that 2 episodes and it would have worked. And it would have been a better arc for that. I think the same thing with Robin, where you see she realized, and she's even realizing on her wedding day who she should be with, and I think there's a scene where they're at the Halloween party. She shows up and she sees him with a hanging Chad costume, and he remembers him talking to her when she was waiting for the slutty pumpkin. And which is one of the great episodes where he's sitting there talking to each other, and it's kind of when she realizes she's still in love with him, or she's really in love with him, and she kind of realizes it again, but then she sees him with the mother, and kind of says, the chances pass, and when Lily confronts her, she says, I just can't see them together. I can't. It's more. It's not even like seeing Barney. It's I can't see Ted with his wife because I have these feelings and I don't want to get in the way. And I think that doesn't get played out, but it could have gotten played out over a series of episodes, and it would have been a much better kind of season. I really don't know why they avoided it. They focused on this one tiny little thing and this manufactured drama with Lily and Marshall, instead of kind of why don't just tell a story over 10 years over the course of 22 episodes. I think that would have been more interesting than what they ended up doing.
I thought the narrative for Lily and Marshall was pretty tight. The one problem, this show's problem in general, and actually this is one strength of Babylon 5. To just give 2 notes, Babylon 5, he wrote it as a 5-season arc. Another kind of annoying thing is he thought he was going to get canceled at the end of season 4. So he kind of wrapped everything up, and it's why I always felt this when I watched Babylon 5. Season 5 seemed like half of a good season. And it's basically because instead of having all this stuff that he wrapped up at the end of season 4 overlap into season 5, he had to wrap it up and then kind of start from scratch. He had to make stuff up.
He also ran out of money, right? So it's the whole thing. It's he didn't have the same amount of money when it was with TNT that he was doing it, and they come in, and TNT came in with the soup. But it was you're right. I think the best end is the future episode where they go in and they have Londo's story arc, and I think that's kind of. But he was willing to adapt, I think, and again, it worked.
He did great, but to that point, he also was concise. And the How I Met Your Mother, their issue was they had a story that was maybe 3 seasons long, maybe 4, and they stretched it out to 9.
As I said, I disagree with you. I think it was strong all the way through season 7. I think season 8 was a bit of a drop off, and I think because they weren't willing to tie down and get to the mother and then just tell the storyline all the way to the end, right? Instead of spending all the time to get to the present day, as I said, they should have just gone into the future, just get it over like a wound and just tell stories going forward. And I think that would have worked out better than what they ended up with.
I would, if you can convince them to give you money and be a producer on it, like we say you should go work for an NBA team, go work for I would love to have you redo season 9. Because there was definitely some strong stuff in there. And like you're pointing out, if there was a different editor and they had basically allocated the episodes much differently than like a stupid Dragon Ball Z run, it could have been really strong. This has actually been really
cathartic. I think it gets down to the hero's journey, right? So I think if you're familiar with the steps of the hero's journey, what you're upset about is you didn't get the denouement for each one of the characters, and you kind of feel like you end in the middle of the story, right? And then you get it's like if the Star Wars trilogy ended with Empire Strikes Back, and then you got a 15-minute kind of summary that basically, to put Return of the Jedi happened in 15 minutes tacked on at the end of Empire Strikes Back. That would not be good, right?
Yeah, you're watching that, you're like, there were teddy bears. What the? Yeah, you are nailing the metaphors. The George Carl.
The teddy bears just shut down the Empire. What the hell just happened? Which is that's like the stupidest Deus Ex Machina ever. What the hell just happened? And it would be kind of the same thing. It's like, what? And Okay, and I think that's if you start thinking about like taking all these great movies and just shorten it, or like if Lord of the Rings kind of instead of having the 3 books, Return of the Kings was like 100 pages tacked on at the end of like
To be
the
fair, I
the
will actually
Tower.
say Return of the King could have handled with some editing. With some editing, definitely.
I love the Raising of the Shire.
All right, I don't. We're starting to tack on more and more pop
No, no,
culture,
no.
definitely.
But I mean, I think the point is that like they didn't finish the story, right? And I think or they didn't finish the story properly, and I think that's I mean that's the problem. They were all focused on getting to that one moment and saying, oh, the end has to be when I met the mother, and really that wasn't the proper end to the story, right?
Yeah, I'm trying. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And like I said, this has actually been very cathartic for me because I think talking to you, it's like you're realizing it that the issue with the final episode, the issue with the final season, was less about. I mean, it was less about the narrative and more about the narrative focus. They could have told a decent story with the exact same materials. They just needed to edit it better and put their focus elsewhere. So
Do you agree that everybody was in character? And I think this is important. Do you feel like there was anything that happened in that final episode to the end of the story where like the characters were not who they'd been developed? I mean, I think everybody was fairly
absolutely.
consistent to their narrative arc. I mean,
Oh, absolutely. Barney doesn't grow up and Barney reverts to himself, and it's not until he's attached to something he has to love unconditionally that he shows any change. He already did that with Robin. Their lives were incompatible. Robin remains I like that Robin remained career focused. I like that they didn't have the like she gives up on her career.
She doesn't really. Why is she back in New York? I mean, that's the whole
But
point.
that's after she's gone through her career. I mean, that's the point is that she doesn't
No,
the thing about Robin is
she doesn't change until he needs her, right? And I think
but
that's
I would say she's not doing a compromise. She doesn't do the it was the same story that was really good right when the guy
again, she wasn't ready to settle down with him. The whole point was Robin wasn't ready to settle down with Ted, and when she was ready to settle down with Ted, right, he had already met the mother, and so she really doesn't come back until kind of he needs her, right? So he basically that's the whole tragedy of the story is like I mean he would have married, like Ted would have spent the rest of his life with her, but she wasn't ready to. And I think that's the whole story of their relationship is about that. It's like she was never ready or it was never the right time. And I think that's kind of the point of her arc is like she eventually gets him, but and again, they don't play the character well because it's almost like the roles reversed once, because he was always waiting for her, but after the wedding and after he meets the mother, then she's always waiting for him, and we don't get to see that. And I think that happens off camera, but it's implied that he was always waiting for her for the first like 9 seasons of the show, but like from the point where he meets the mother, then she's always kind of waiting for him, and that's kind of so we don't get to see the tragedy flipped. And I think that's if you're viewing it from a narrative arc point of view, we're telling the story, then it would be important for like the first half of the arc, like the hero's always chasing the heroine, and then the arc flips, right? And it's almost like sadly for the mother, if the story is Robin and Ted, she's almost a narrative device. She is the suitcase full of gold. She's the MacGuffin.
You are absolutely right. You're absolutely right there. And like I said, she was definitely fridged. And given how great she was, I feel that was rough. And I think that they kind of hurt themselves. I don't think they realized, or maybe they did, how good she was going to be.
But they basically kept switching. But she's not the first great MacGuffin. Victoria was a great MacGuffin. Stella
was great too.
Stella, my wife hated Stella. I mean,
your wife hated Sarah Chalk.
She just could not stand that character.
The amazing Sarah Chalk.
She hated that character. She hated that character. It wasn't, and she just didn't like it. It wasn't Sarah Chalk. It was just she didn't like the character. She thought she was I mean, she just didn't like that character. And it just, but again, every one of those women was a MacGuffin, and she was a plot device to drive the relationship. And the story is always like he's always kind of trying, and she's never wanted him, and then kind of when she's ready for it, he's not there. And again, what we don't get to see, as I said, is when she's coming back to support him and be there for him, and he's not ready. And I think that would have made for better TV. I think. I mean, I think they should have. I mean,
no disagreement. 100% agree. All right. So by the way, our audio is starting to cut out a little. I've noticed, and we've hit about the hour mark. And this, like I said, this
Only
has
an
been
hour?
very. It's a little over. Brian gave me the 41-minute mark 22 minutes ago.
Okay. Yeah, I was like, it could be over an hour.
But yeah, I mean, it's been very. He says it's in an hour and 4 minutes, or that was very confusing, Brian. There's no way it's an hour and 40 minutes. There we go. Okay. So it was very therapeutic for me. I hate the finale less than I did before, especially as you've revealed some of the like obvious off-camera stuff that meant it could have been a good plot. I still think Woman 31 and the fridging of the mother, I'll never quite be able to reconcile those.
Woman, it's
Nor will I
31,
ever
but
be-
okay.
What?
Woman 31. But again, it's within character for Barney. Barney acts like an a-hole to get over the fact that he feels betrayed by the world. Every time he opens up, he feels betrayed by the world. And I think that's his story arc. And I think, and there are reasons for that, and then it makes sense, the story arc for the character.
I actually, dang it, man, not bad. That you're actually doing good. I'll give you that. And then of course the Lockett episode. I think you're right. It's characters not behaving rationally, but it was the buildup. Given the buildup to the Lockett episode, I was upset by the resolution. But other than that, I mean, I'm less disappointed. Obviously, it's not even close to Anthony Bennett at this point. And hopefully you like How I Met Your... I know a few, I think Josh Price is one person that follows us on Twitter. I've talked to him about How I Met Your Mother a few times. So hopefully you all were either How I Met Your Mother fans or Spurs fans. And if you weren't, don't worry, we'll be back to bashing the Lakers and the Knicks in a week or two.
Yeah, we definitely will. I think we get to talk playoffs next time. Playoffs? We talking playoffs?
And maybe we'll have to have Devin on depending on the resolution of your Final Fantasy or the finals of the Fantasy League.
Which we are the first expansion teams to make it the finals. And Dre has basically made it uphill because he basically gave away Kevin Love to Devin.
I did not. That was
you gave him away.
That was
explain the trade to our fans and see if they agree with me or you.
This is an obnoxious way to get people off of you being mad. This is what we'll end on, Brian, if you haven't already cut us out. If you have, don't worry about it. I traded away Kevin Love, who was expensive, for very cheap. I want to stress, all three of these players had ridiculously low contracts for long term. Wesley Matthews, Goran Dragic, and Thiago Splitter. Basically, I was filling three positions on my roster, all with very cheap people going forward. And then next season, DeAndre Jordan is coming out in the draft, so I would have a lot of cap space available to get some marquee free agents to replace Kevin Love, as well as having replaced a majority of my roster.
Wait,
that was my thinking.
What was I offering you instead of that?
Well, the thing is, your trade wasn't good. So Arturo offered me up basically Kenneth Faried, Ty Lawson, and Russell Westbrook. My belief was I said Ty Lawson's not marquee anymore, and Russell Westbrook sucks. And of course, what ended up happening is right after I made my trade, Goran Dragic goes down with injury and has been meh. Same has been true with Wes Matthews, and Ty Lawson's returned, and Russell Westbrook's playing the best ball of his career. So, yes, in hindsight, that
so is
looks
Kenneth
like
Faried, by the way.
Well, Kenneth Faried was a star. That was the hard part to give up on. But anyway, that's for all of you that were hoping to end on a little basketball. I'm gonna ignore your comments, to be honest. If there are any trade calls, I'm just gonna leave them alone. I got flamed enough by the league after I made the trade, so you can just look at me and consider my trade more disappointing than the end of How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, it's going to be it won't be, well, if I manage to somehow win the finals against Devin and beat him again on the road, then it won't be as disappointing.
All right. Have a good week, everybody.